you.
Thank you very much. So thank you everyone for being here. It's really interesting putting this talk together. I do have slides in my fashion, so I'm going to share those. So hopefully, can you see those? You see those? Okay, thank you. So I'm not green-fingered, or was not green-fingered at all. You know, as I just said in the chat just before, you know, if whenever I've tried to bring plants to my house, they would come there to die, sadly. I've always, you know, it's never been something that I've been comfortable with, knowledgeable about. So what I'm doing now is quite a departure from the norm. So I want to talk a little bit about how I got there as well, but swapping the camera for the shovel. So as the title suggests, I'm actually a filmmaker and a photographer. I teach photography for a living at the university in West of England, Bristol. And if you said to me a year ago that, yeah, we're going to be in this thing called lockdown and, you know, no one's going to be allowed to leave their house, what would you be doing? I thought I would be one of those people out there with a camera, making films, doing photography, interviewing people from a distance and making work. Do you know what I mean? It'd be, I'm quite prolific with making work out of nothing. And I absolutely thought I'd be one of those people that would be doing that. So it was quite a surprise for myself when lockdown actually happened that I didn't have the motivation to do that whatsoever. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So this is what I'm actually finding myself kind of doing, which is a surprise to me and most people are kind of around me, really, as well as obviously the Zoom University that we all now find ourselves in and other kind of spaces, doing a lot of academic work, you know, keeping the curriculum afloat, etc. But I need to go back. This isn't just a contemporary today story for me and why the story for the allotment. I need to go back to about 1990. You know, I'm a Rasta, embraced Rasta way of life at about 1990. And when I kind of, you know, accepted that as kind of a philosophy that I was kind of interested in, I actually changed my names by default. And my previous middle names were Anthony and McDonald. I don't usually admit to the McDonald, but I'm sharing it with you today. But actually, what I changed my names to was middle names was Ezra and Naphtali. And some within Rasta circles and also not Rasta circles, particularly within Bath and Bristol, a lot of people know me as Naphtali. No one really knows that my other middle name is Ezra. I want to talk about where that comes from. But just very quickly, when you know the colors of the Ethiopian flag, the Rasta flag, the green, gold, and red, the green stands for nature, and it is about that respect for nature, respect for the earth, you know, and you know, so it's ingrained. This connection to nature is ingrained within Rastafari ideology and philosophy. But I'll talk about that in a moment. But Ezra, I've always loved the name Ezra, but there was no way I was going to name myself after a huge prophet. You know, that's just not me. So when I was looking at the Bible dictionary, and the name Ezra was very close, and Ezra was how I read it at the time, was a humble farmer, you know, mentioned once in the Bible, not this big prophet like Ezra. Actually, he was just this little one guy who looked after a group of farmers. And I thought, okay, yeah, I could relate to that. That's a little bit more low key. I can relate to that kind of person. So then I adopted that as my other name. So as a photographer, I've always been, you know, and a lot of photographers are tuned into photographing nature. You know, and you know, photographers aren't the only people, but as photographers, we're quite tuned into noticing little things. We're definitely not the only people to notice a flower growing out a crack in the wall, but taking a photograph of it forces you to pay attention to it and giving it a different gravitas. So, and I've actually got quite a lot of students and also people that I studied with that are actually now florists. They now run, you know, small farms and small holdings. So I think there's this really interesting connection between photography and flowers and nature. But for me, to be honest, you know, this was in 2008. These are my daughters when we moved home, and we went for a walk, and I did a lot of photography on the way. But I have to be honest that my connection with nature I wasn't living close to the earth. I was connected through nature, maybe through the camera and taking pictures, but in my day-to-day life, It was completely non-existent, so I'm definitely an urban individual, living in concrete. I'm not someone that would find it easily to be self-sufficient living up in the hills, which is the Rastafari romantic ideal. But that's not necessarily where I felt comfortable. So forgive this very big slide, but I needed to kind of go through, because when different things happen in your life and you pay attention to it, and there's different touchstones along the way that have led me here. And it's very personal. I'm going to get into some quite personal territory here. January 2000, and try to go through it quite quickly. Urban Birder, this book that I found in a charity shop in January 2017. David Lindo, Black British man, similar age to me. And in Urban Birder, he talks about how he grew up in the middle of London, but actually his interest was in bird spotting and nature, but he felt he had no one else to kind of relate to. So he wrote this book, and he's now quite well known. He's on TV and stuff, but he wrote this book about his experiences of getting close to nature, or why that's important, not only as a Black individual, but also, living in an urban setting. And in that same month, I was with Professor Paul Gilroy, at a conference, and we had this conversation. And actually, he knows David Lindo, who goes on walks with him. And Paul was talking about his own increasing connection with nature. I find that really interesting. Paul Gilroy is definitely an academic that I look up to, a big brain in critical race discourse. And it's really interesting we were having this conversation about nature in the middle of a reggae conference in Norwich. October 2017, I took part in a project called Black and Green, led by Jasmine Kettlebell Foley and Zakia McKenzie. And Black and Green was trying to get Black people from ethnic minorities, quote unquote, more attuned to nature. What's their attitudes towards the environment, and it's kind of a consultation participatory project. So I was actually a participant. Usually I'm one of the people leading projects, but I was taking part in it. And, there was a photography element, there was interviews. So I was being asked about what's my day-to-day connection with nature, how do I relate to it? And I found it quite challenging because, I could give it all the talk as someone who understands the importance of it, but actually when I wasn't living it. So there was definitely a disconnect with how I was able to experience that. And I find that really useful to go through that process. May the following year, my dad passed away, and I was on compassionate leave for quite a long time. The funeral wasn't until the end of June. And, your priorities change. And definitely, things stopped, and I started to tune into things in a different way. And not long after, I kind of, obviously dealing with what needed to be dealt with on that level. And for whatever reason, I started this Instagram account called Nature Theory and Practice. And one of the first posts I posted on the 12th of June, the day after I founded it, the thing, was actually, I started to do a bit of a visual ethnography of all the sympathy cards that were in my mum's house. And every single one of them, I noticed, had a representation of nature. Every single one of them had flowers, usually some butterflies or birds. So every single one of them, I was like, just, wow, that's really interesting. So I started to kind of just do a bit of a, close-up photography of all these things. And I was using that Instagram account to, in a way, starting to recognize my shift in my priority. I wasn't at work. Obviously, I was dealing with what I needed to deal with my mum and organising the funeral. And I was really definitely starting to tune in more to, actually, there's more to life than work, and there's more to life to making stuff. During that same period as well, I've got a tiny back garden, but you would have thought it was like the Amazon. It was a huge jungle, really overgrown. And I made a point of clearing it, and that was quite cathartic in that time. I made a cross for the graveside. I just wanted to use my hands. I haven't done carpentry since I was at school, but it just felt like something I needed and wanted to do. And not long afterwards, I met up with Ruth, who's in this room today. Hello, Ruth. And, I was telling her about a lot of these things. We're having a conversation. And she's like, oh, yeah, I've got an allotment. And, You know, it was only up the road. Let's go and see it, etc. And you know, and that was definitely one of the turning points of okay, yeah, let me start to take this thing seriously. And you know, I've been thinking about allotment before that, but Ruth definitely, I've known Ruth for a long time, we've worked together for ages, and she was like, just go for it, just go for it. So I was like, okay, fine. So I was on the waiting list for about a year, and then in October the following year, you know, got this plot in Dubbers Lane allotment, but it's only now in April with the academic Easter break that I've actually found myself time to actually go on it. So this is a kind of a stepping stone that I've definitely sort of taken notice of. And to talk about COVID-19 very specifically, when it first hit the UK, in a serious way, I was assessing. It's assessment period for us, and when lockdown happened, 23rd of March, I was still assessing up to the 6th of April. So I didn't really have time to process what was going on. You know, obviously I was retweeting and mouthing off on Twitter and Facebook, but I didn't really have time to just meditate and just sit with it because I was just too busy with academic deadlines. So the 7th of May was the first time I really, you know, had time to just be myself. No, you know, had the out of office on my email. I could spend time with it. This is what the allotment looked like in October when I first got it. There's Ruth at the back. There's my daughter Aisha, and it looks like we're social distancing, but we're not there. But you can see that it's all overgrown. And in April, it looks even worse. So on the 7th of April, I got there, cut it all down, and this is what it looked like. Also on the 7th of April, I really just, you know, I just laid into it like life was going out of fashion kind of thing. And I just learned, and you know, I didn't know anything about an allotment. I was Googling stuff, making things up as I went along, asking people. And I have to say, you know, the allotment, there's a pathway that goes, you know, a public pathway, and there's also a water butt right next to my plot. So everybody who goes to the allotment sees my patch. When I first got offered a place in a plot, originally I turned it down. There's one directly opposite this one, just pretty much. And I actually didn't want a plot that was so public because I thought everyone's going to see it. I've no idea what I'm going to doing. Everyone's going to be taking the mickey. So I actually originally turned down a plot, and I waited for about 2 or 3 months. And Anya, the other manager of the space with Ruth, Anya said, okay, another plot's come up. And I was just like, you know what? This is the 3rd one now I've been offered. Just take it. Stop being so stupid and take it. And it's actually forced me, it's been brilliant, to be honest, because it's forced me to be sociable, not socially awkward. If I was hid in the back somewhere, I wouldn't have been meeting people. I wouldn't have been asking people advice. So it's actually been really useful to have such a public plot in space. So if I'm thinking about kind of some words that kind of what it's been like, it's definitely been scary because I haven't known what I'm really doing. But actually there's a lot to learn. Meditative, you know, I don't really work with my hands a lot. I'm always on a computer or reading essays or, you know, doing that type of work. So working with my hands, I'm finding quite a physical, meditative kind of space. Relaxation, cathartic, satisfying when you start to see things grow. Physical, you know, I don't do any exercise whatsoever. I don't jog, I don't go to the gym, and I quite pride myself. You know, anyone I know that does a lot of physical exercise, they feel worse afterwards. They got a lot of injuries. So that's always my excuse why I don't do a lot of exercise. But actually, you know, this is all good exercise that I'm finding. I'm obviously outside in the fresh air, slow paced as well, because I'm always rushing around. I'm one of these people that never have any time in my diary, you know, and that's a fault of my own, not necessarily, you know, I'm not even blaming workload particularly. That's just how I roll. So rushing from here to there. So actually the stopping, slowing down, I've actually found has been really necessary because actually, you know, I'm 48 now. I can't keep working at that pace. I need to work at a different pace. So after lockdown, after COVID, I actually don't want things to go back to how they were. I actually want to try to adopt this much more slower pace. And yeah, I think it's just necessary for my own physical and mental well-being. Um, so now I've kind of got it all divided into sections. These photographs were taken when I first planted stuff. So as you can see here, I've got everything's basically a vegetable or herb, but I've got sunflowers at the front. At the moment, I've got rhubarbs growing. I don't even know where they've come from. Not rhubarbs, radishes. There's a lot of radishes popping through. I've no idea where they I don't even like radish. But you know, so it's just been a really useful, yeah, just really rewarding is the word. Just this footnote at the bottom. You know, when I said after my dad died, I cleared the back garden because it's like a jungle. You know, I'm definitely not going to tell a lie. I didn't keep that up. I had visions of my back garden becoming an allotment, but that quickly grew back, and I cut it down back again just last week, and I cleared it again. Now I know what I'm doing. I am going to turn that into a mini allotment plot now. But yeah, things are growing. There's some shallots sprouting through. My peas are looking really healthy, and I just want to end with this little video. My daughters came and saw it the other day. My youngest daughter had seen it before, but it's the first time my eldest daughter had seen it. And so this little video was shot from my youngest that features my eldest. So they were just having a fun day messing about. And yeah, it's just really lovely. But I'd never thought I would be that person with the allotment. But actually, I like the new me, and I want to continue in liking the new me. So that is that. Thank you very much.
One of my favorite things about these is that everybody claps, and there's just this line of people waving their hands in front of their cameras. Thank you so much, and for linking through, you know, something that kind of seems to have happened fairly spontaneously through to sort of a deeper sort of spiritual connection. And I think that really connects to a load of the other talks that we've had, even if that was serendipitously. We've been talking a lot about our ancestors and honouring our past and our future and thinking about who we are in our spaces. So it's been that really sort of built on that for people who've been through some of these other talks. This is a superficial question, yeah. But what is your favourite thing to do? What's your favourite thing you do at your allotment, like in terms of it being, you know, this mindful practice?
Okay, that's a really interesting. I can already tell you what the least favourite thing to do is. Let me start with the negative, which is weeding. Yeah, that's not a fan of weeding. Yeah, and also having to decide what's a weed and what's not a weed. And you know, even growing up, I always saw weeding and weeds as quite a fascist notion. Why is a weed less important than another flower just because it doesn't have an ornamental use or you can't eat it? So my excuse for never being into gardening, that is actually quite a dystopian enterprise. Anyway, get back to your question. I mean, I like, you know, definitely I like the watering. I like the, you know, the tendering. So when the potatoes are coming through, you have to kind of pile up earth around it. So I like that kind of nurturing side, which is really interesting. And I think the general tidying of the space as well, you know, I mean, when I get into weeding, it's okay. But also, you know, there are these different philosophies with allotments of no dig and whether you dig and stuff like that. But I actually quite enjoy turning over the earth and, you know, and seeing it turned over with the shovel and all that kind of stuff. Do you know what I mean? And that kind of physicality to it, I kind of enjoy it. And to be honest, you know, and again, I'm kind of hailing up Ruth because she is a mentor for me in this world. That one of the things that she said is any produce is a bonus. Actually, just enjoy being there and the process. I've definitely taken that on board. You know, last 2 nights there's been a big frost. My pumpkins are now dead. My courgettes are now dead. A couple of peas look like they're on the way out. But actually, other things, you know, the potatoes are keeping going. You know, so yeah, I'm enjoying just the learning of it really. And also, I don't want to sound pretentious, but as an educator, I'm always interested in sharing stuff as well. Do you know what I mean? So I'm not doing this talk pretending I'm an expert in allotment. And also with my nature process in theory Instagram account, I'm not pretending I know everything about nature. I'm very transparent about my mistakes, what I don't know. But that immediate transference of knowledge, I find what I would want in education. Do you know what I mean? Where the teacher is saying, I don't know what I'm doing, let's go and find out. So I'm enjoying that process as well, really. Yeah.
I mean, amen. That sums up the purpose of this. Like, and big up to Ruth. Furaha, go for it.
Thanks so much, Shawn. That was stunning. I really enjoyed that. And just to echo what Hannah is saying, that the purpose of Boredom Bite Size is not because it's not to showcase expertise as such. It's just to cultivate a space for us where we feel safe enough to share our thoughts, our concerns,